This is Ezekiel, back in Combat Mission Battle for Normandy, back in the editor to talk in part 2 of this video series about the experimental operation idea in the campaign editor. In this part of the video, I want to talk about how to win this campaign and how to really get there. So we're talking victory conditions for the player and to try and simulate that natural progression to the end of the map and to the end of the operation. I'm going to stop using the word campaign, even though we're using the campaign features in Combat Mission scenario editor tools. I want to start using the operations phrase because it is what I'm trying to replicate. Okay, so basically this is the deployment area. You saw this in the last part. It is pretty open. The Americans will, as the Allied player, will be starting here, and they have to get to the end of the map. The main way to end the campaign is, in my view, what I'm trying to do here is to basically have three. I'll actually do that from the top. Is to actually have three suitable exit points. Which would represent like securing the entire end of the map. I don't want to put down an entire green line. I think that's a bit overkill. But if there is three individual, these are all the same objective, but three individual points. So the Allied player needs to hold all three and kick the Germans out of all three at the same time in the same engagement to actually end the campaign. That is the only real end campaign objective. Historically, I believe it's this road here that actually leads on to St. Lo, but of course over here is the, I forgot that little hamlet's name, but it is basically a connecting point for where the next battalion was located. So yeah, so that fully represents that you've taken the end of the map. How to get there is another story. So there's some of this conversations on the forums, which is thanks a lot to guys who has chipped in already. I didn't think I'll get that much of a response, but hey, it's good to know people are looking at that part of the forum. How to get there is going to be a little bit more problematic. We're not counting Germans here. We're actually counting on how do you actually progress the campaign and show the player actually has made step-by-step progress. I am going into this thinking you really only need that objective for every single engagement in this operation. Breaking my own rule there. Basically, if they take the objective, you end the campaign. If they don't take the objective, they lose, and I have virtual in quotation marks there. They lose that engagement. When a player loses the engagement, all that happens is they get kicked back to their deployment zone, and time progresses and the date progresses a little bit. The weather changes and there's the replenishment and the usual in-between situation happens. Doing that though does cause one big problem, I think, and that is basically you always kicking the player back to the objective area means they've got to trudge across the map again. Now, trudging across the map again should be easier as time progresses, as the Germans are considerably weakened. So, you should be able to easily get across, say, half the map towards the end of the campaign, then the real fight starts. However, I am well aware that is actually a cause of concern. I mean, it will make a lot of dead time and make the beginning engagements of the second half of the campaign quite boring and just a lot of infantry movement. That can be compensated a little bit by maybe a few surprises on the AI side. But they can sometimes feel very cheap. But also giving the player more time in the second half of the campaign just to acknowledge they've got to trudge those forces up the hill a little bit first to get to the main engagement. It is also somewhat realistic though, looking at this map. I mean, you can see why this open area would be seen as a bit of a marshalling area. It is quite open, and potentially when you're down at ground level, you can see. Also quite heavily out of line of sight of the Germans, especially up here towards the trees. But then again, the Germans, if they had pre-registered targets, could actually, target them pretty easily. So yeah, that is the concern of having this one objective. The other option that I am thinking is perhaps maybe have a midpoint objective. So you have the full map, but you have the three square, objectives, same objective but 3 squares across the map at the halfway point, and at that point, maybe that once that's reached, you can actually push this deployment zone, to cover all this half of the map. So it gives the player a bit of a head start before they have to worry about the second half of the map. The other option I am thinking of, because the American player in the first engagement, because it's a little bit contained, and it's all no man's land in front of them, it won't probably be the full battalion. It'll be like a lead-in engagement or two, where the mission is quite simply to get some breathing space. The Germans, historically, at least according to the Osprey book, their strong point was set up all up here, fair enough, but it also stretched all the way down and covered this flank as well. So, I mean, part of me saying I shouldn't tell the player that, they should work that out themselves, but the obvious strategy would be to try and cut these Germans off or clear them out piece by piece and have that flank secured before you start progressing up the hill. So maybe one option is to not have those objectives up there for, say, the first bit of the engagement, and basically have one along here to simulate. Look, the player has to really push that into the map first, clear it, secure it, and then switch it around to the second engagement, which represents the start of the push up the hill. That is another option, or we can do a combination of all three. So just to summarise, just have the one objective, let the player go free, and they can. It's whenever they actually get there. The second one is to have that midpoint, which basically allows us to have like a reset halfway through the campaign or the operation, and then they worry about the second half. And the third option is to also include an objective over here before these objectives, which basically pushes the player and encourages the player to clear out this flank of theirs first. At this point, I am thinking the map stays exactly the same for every engagement. So there's nothing, even though the objective's over here, there is nothing stopping the player from the American player from actually probing ahead and trying to work out where the Germans may have their front line for future engagements. That would actually be strongly encouraged, I think, especially for the advanced players. Really trying to get that mentality of looking ahead to future engagements, not just the current one. So that is the general idea. How the degree of victory is actually determined is quite simply, at what point do you reach this? So if every engagement occurs, say every 4 hours, maybe 6 hours, and the engagements last for say an hour and a half every time, or maybe an hour. That gives you quite a number of engagements that occur through each day and overnight as well. Historically, they did take 2 days to clear this map, July 13th and 14th, and even on the 14th, I believe it was the southeast corner, so over here, they didn't actually finish clearing this out. The Germans actually pulled back on their own accord after the other battalions over here were able to swing around and actually threaten these guys with a massive flanking manoeuvre. So basically, my idea is if you can actually beat the historical period, the actual historical time it took to get up the hill, so the 2 days, you get a very high degree of victory. If it's around the historical point, you get like a tactical victory, like congratulations. But again, if you are fall behind schedule, and the further you fall behind the actual historical outcome, the degree of defeat kicks in for the overall campaign. You may be wondering, how do you do that? In the campaign, the actual designer can actually script which ending players receive. The actual summary is locked between a win summary and a lose summary, unfortunately. But the actual degree of victory can be determined by the campaign script, not by the victory point system. So that is my thinking of actually how to display at the end of the campaign if the player was above average, or, well, we'll call them the worst general, the worst general in history. Okay, that's a bit rough, isn't it? But anyway, so yeah, so that is my thinking about objectives and actually getting across the map. I think that's going to work. I am limited in basically the campaign system, and the scripting only accounts for a win and a loss scenario for every engagement. So that means The degree of victory is determined by the scenario designer, and if the player achieves that or goes greater than that, according to the victory points of the scenario, it goes down one path of the campaign script. If a defeat occurs or the degree of victory is not strong enough based on the campaign script, they go down another path. There isn't a third option. There isn't, you know, a midpoint. I was thinking at some point you give the Germans victory points based on kills, or if they knock out the American forces, say 50% of their strength, then maybe the campaign should just end completely, really early, and a total defeat for the Americans, because, you know, representing the battalion would be pulled off the line, and not in disgrace, but, you know, it's no longer a fighting force, and you as a battalion commander you failed to meet your objective. However, I can't do that with this win-loss scenario to determine if you've won the campaign or not, because I don't have a third option. You know, I could actually if I had a third option, I could set the victory points system to have a complete victory for the Americans, the general loss for if they need to continue the campaign for another engagement, and then a total loss, and you really up the points in that space to give the Germans an enormous points advantage to symbolise they won as soon as they hit that 50% mark on your troops. So I was thinking about that, but unfortunately the limits of the campaign script at the moment means I cannot do that. So I just thought I'd share that idea, but unfortunately that last one's just simply not going to work. So I think that we'll leave it there. That should hopefully spur some more discussion about where I am at on this. No mapping progress to report as of yet, but I think not locking down how to win the campaign is pretty damn important. So yeah, please leave comments below. I will also now leave a link in the description for where the Battlefront forum post is on this. Already got some pretty heavy replies, which is good, and hopefully I will see you all again real soon. Thanks for watching.